Most people think they understand how military power works. It's a simple formula, right? Big country equals big army, small country equals small influence. It's an obvious logic that makes countries like Portugal completely disappear from the conversation. When analysts talk about NATO power in the Atlantic, they look at the carrier strike groups of the United States. They talk about the British Royal Navy or the French nuclear deterrent. Portugal? Most people just imagine a place where British tourists go to forget their responsibilities for a week. But if you think Portugal is just about beaches and football, you're missing one of the most sophisticated strategic pivots in modern history. Because in 2026, Lisbon has pulled off a feat 500 years in the making. While the world's superpowers were arguing over raw tank numbers and fighter jet counts, Portugal quietly secured something far more valuable: the triple threat. By specializing in maritime surveillance, subsurface detection, and aerial refueling, three things the rest of the alliance has dangerously neglected. This nation of just 10 million people has made itself the one player NATO cannot function without. If you zoom out and look at a map of the Atlantic today, Portugal isn't just another member. It's the alliance's most important specialist. They didn't achieve this by trying to outspend the giants. They did the exact opposite. Instead of building a mini Germany or a mini France, they built the exact military NATO actually needs for a contested ocean. It all starts with the numbers that usually lead people to underestimate them. On paper, the Portuguese armed forces field roughly 27,000 active personnel. That's smaller than the police force in some American states. Even with 200,000 reserves, they aren't built to win a land war in Europe alone. And that's the point. Portugal's strategy is about plugging in. They've traded quantity for high-end specialization. Take the army. They only have about 37 Leopard 2 A6 tanks. But look closer. These aren't Cold War relics. They are top-tier machines with 120mm smoothbore cannons and advanced fire control systems. They don't have many, but the ones they have are lethal. The same goes for their mobility. They've swapped heavy, slow tracks for nearly 200 Pander 2 8x8 vehicles. It's a special forces unit on wheels, fast, flexible, and ready to deploy to a NATO crisis zone without the massive logistical baggage of a traditional armored division. But the real shift, it's in the sky. If the war in Ukraine taught us anything, it's that drones now rule the battlefield. Portugal is adapting faster than most, integrating mobile missile launchers and dedicated counter-drone networks into their light L118 and M109 artillery units. They aren't trying to build the biggest army. They are building the most useful one. And that philosophy is nowhere more apparent than in their recent gamble on a specific aircraft that has the rest of NATO scrambling to catch up. If you ask most people to name a powerful military aircraft, they'll probably point to the F-35, maybe the F-22. If they're feeling nostalgic, maybe the F-16. Transport aircraft rarely make that list. They aren't glamorous. They don't fire heat-seeking missiles. They don't break the sound barrier while doing dramatic loops over air shows. They carry cargo. But here's the uncomfortable truth about modern warfare. Wars aren't won by the aircraft that look the coolest on a poster. They're won by the aircraft that can move an entire army across the planet before the enemy even realizes what's happening. And this is where Portugal quietly made one of the smartest military purchases in European history. Because while many NATO countries were arguing about budgets, debating fighter upgrades, and struggling to replace aging transport fleets, Portugal did something very simple. It bought the aircraft everyone suddenly realized they needed: the KC-390 Millennium. At first glance, the KC-390 doesn't look revolutionary. It's a large twin-engine military transport aircraft designed to replace aging workhorses like the C-130 Hercules. But the moment you look closer, you realize why this machine is a game changer. First, there's the speed. A KC-390 can cruise at roughly 870 kilometers per hour. That makes it significantly faster than the classic turboprop transports many Air Force forces still rely on. In the world of military logistics, hours aren't just numbers on a clock. They are the margin between a battlefield collapsing or stabilizing. But speed isn't the only reason the KC-390 matters. The aircraft is a versatile beast. It can carry armored vehicles, helicopters, pallets of ammunition, disaster relief supplies, and full paratrooper units. It can land on rough, unpaved airstrips and operate from the most austere environments on Earth. However, the real triple threat magic happens with its secondary role. The K in KC-390 stands for tanker. This aircraft is a flying fuel station. By turning a transport plane into an aerial refueler, Portugal has created a massive force multiplier. Imagine a NATO fighter squadron trying to cross the Atlantic. Without tankers, those jets are forced to take the long way, constantly stopping, landing, refueling, and carefully managing their range. But introduce a Portuguese KC-390 into the mix, and suddenly those fighters can cross entire oceans in a single leap. They can stay airborne longer, reach targets they otherwise couldn't, and strike with a level of persistence that changes the math for any adversary. Portugal isn't just transporting equipment, it is extending the lethal reach of the entire NATO alliance. And Lisbon didn't just stop at buying the aircraft for themselves. They secured purchase options up to 10 more that other NATO countries can tap into. That might sound like a small administrative detail, but strategically, it's a masterstroke. It turns Portugal into a logistics gateway. As more European nations like Austria, the Netherlands, and the Czech Republic adopt the KC-390, Portugal becomes the central node connecting operators, training programs, and maintenance infrastructure. Suddenly, the Portuguese Air Force isn't just flying missions. It's shaping the very backbone of NATO logistics. Now, combine that mobility with Portugal's existing teeth. The country operates a fleet of modernized F-16AM and F-16BM fighters. They may not be the newest jets in the world, but they are highly capable, battle-tested machines that have been repeatedly upgraded to meet modern standards. These Portuguese F-16s aren't just sitting in hangars. They are the global police of the Atlantic. They regularly participate in NATO air policing missions, patrolling the Baltic skies, and deploying to Iceland to guard the alliance's northern flank. Which means Portuguese pilots aren't just defending their own airspace. They are integrated directly into the nervous system of NATO's collective defense. But there is one part of the Portuguese Air Force that often gets overlooked, and it's perhaps the most critical in 2026: maritime patrol. Portugal controls one of the largest exclusive economic zones in Europe, a massive stretch of Atlantic water that is essentially the world's digital highway. Beneath these waves lies a network of undersea cables that carry trillions of dollars in financial transactions and nearly all of the world's internet data. Portuguese P-3C Orion maritime patrol aircraft spend thousands of hours scanning these waters. They are looking for submarines, monitoring suspicious vessels, and tracking activity around this vital undersea infrastructure. While the rest of the world talks about cyber warfare happening inside a computer, Portugal is one of the few countries physically guarding the cables that make the internet possible in the first place. Which brings us to the Portuguese Navy. Because if there is one thing Portugal understands better than almost anyone else, it's the ocean. And their strategy beneath the waves is where the small country myth finally dies. If you ask naval officers what the most dangerous weapon at sea is, they usually don't say aircraft carriers. They don't say destroyers. And they definitely don't say patrol boats. They say submarines. Because submarines don't announce themselves. They don't fly flags, they don't appear on radar screens for everyone to admire. They wait, and Portugal operates 2 of them that are very, very good at that job. The Portuguese Navy's submarine force is built around 2 modern diesel-electric submarines equipped with air-independent propulsion, which is a fancy way of saying they can stay underwater far longer than traditional submarines without surfacing. That matters a lot, because the moment a submarine surfaces or uses a snorkel, it becomes easier to detect. But air-independent propulsion lets these boats remain hidden for extended periods, silently monitoring sea lanes, listening for other submarines, and tracking ships moving across the Atlantic. In modern naval warfare, stealth is everything, and a quiet submarine sitting somewhere in the Atlantic is the maritime equivalent of a sniper hiding in the woods. Nobody knows exactly where it is, but everyone knows it's out there. Portugal's submarines are optimized for anti-submarine warfare and intelligence gathering across vast areas of ocean. That's extremely valuable for NATO, because the Atlantic is not just empty water. It's one of the busiest and most strategically important maritime regions on Earth. Thousands of ships cross it every year: oil tankers, cargo vessels, military convoys. And beneath those ships lies something even more important: an enormous network of undersea cables. These cables carry the majority of global internet traffic, financial systems, data transfers between continents. If those cables are damaged, sabotaged, or cut, entire economies could feel the impact within minutes, which means protecting the Atlantic seabed is now a strategic priority. And submarines are one of the best tools for that job. But the Portuguese Navy doesn't rely on submarines alone. The surface fleet includes several frigates designed for blue water operations. These ships conduct anti-submarine warfare, escort missions, and maritime security patrols across the Atlantic. They are the visible guardians of Portuguese maritime territory. Alongside them are offshore patrol vessels and coastal patrol craft. These ships might not look as intimidating as destroyers, but they perform an essential role. They monitor fishing activity. They track suspicious vessels. They enforce maritime law across a massive ocean area. Because here's something many people don't realize: Portugal controls one of the largest maritime zones in Europe. Its exclusive economic zone stretches across huge areas of the Atlantic Ocean, including the waters surrounding the Azores and Madeira. And that maritime territory includes vital shipping routes connecting Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Which brings us to one of the most fascinating parts of Portugal's modern military strategy: drones. Not flying quadcopters you buy online, naval drones, unmanned surface vessels, underwater robots designed to hunt submarines. Autonomous systems that can detect mines, track ships, and patrol ocean areas without putting sailors at risk. Portugal has quietly turned parts of its coastline into NATO's testing ground for this new technology. Every year, the alliance conducts large exercises known as REPMIS and Dynamic Messenger. These events bring together dozens of countries, defense companies, and research teams. Their goal is simple: figure out how unmanned naval systems will fight the wars of the future. During these exercises, fleets of experimental drones operate alongside traditional warships. Unmanned boats scan the ocean surface. Autonomous underwater vehicles search for mines. Artificial intelligence systems process massive amounts of sensor data in real time. It's essentially a giant laboratory for the future of naval warfare, and Portugal hosts it. Which means the country isn't just operating military equipment, it's helping shape what NATO's naval forces will look like in the decades ahead. But even all of that, the submarines, the frigates, the drones, the Atlantic patrols, still doesn't explain why Portugal suddenly looks so strategically important. To understand that part, you have to look at a map and find a small group of islands sitting almost in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the Azores, because those islands might be one of the most valuable pieces of geography NATO has, and they turn Portugal into something much more powerful than its size would suggest. If you open a map of the Atlantic Ocean, something becomes obvious very quickly. Europe sits on one side, North America sits on the other. Between them is thousands of kilometers of open water, and almost exactly in the middle sits the Azores, a small chain of Portuguese islands that, strategically speaking, might be one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in the entire NATO alliance. Because moving military power across the Atlantic is not simple. Fighter jets cannot easily fly that distance without refueling. Transport aircraft need staging bases. Naval forces require logistical support. And this is where the Azores quietly become essential. On one of those islands sits Lajes Air Base, a facility that has played a critical role in NATO operations for decades. For aircraft flying between North America, Europe, and even Africa, Azores acts like a stepping stone in the middle of the ocean. Bombers have used it. Transport aircraft have used it. Fighter jets crossing the Atlantic have used it. During major military operations, from the Cold War to more recent conflicts, Azores has served as a vital transit point for NATO forces moving equipment, troops, and aircraft across continents. And in an era where logistics often decides wars before the first shot is fired, that kind of location becomes priceless. Combine that geography with Portugal's KC-390 transport fleet, its Atlantic Maritime Patrol aircraft, its submarines monitoring undersea activity, and its naval drone experimentation programs, and something interesting starts to appear. Portugal isn't trying to be the biggest military power in NATO. It's trying to be the one the alliance cannot function without. The country controls the gateway between Europe and the Atlantic. It protects massive maritime territory. It hosts experiments shaping the future of naval warfare. It provides airlift and refueling capability that allows NATO forces to move faster across oceans. And it guards infrastructure that quietly powers the modern world. Those undersea cables linking continents together, which is why Portugal's strategy is actually very clever. Instead of competing with superpowers, it became indispensable to them. It's a military philosophy that goes all the way back to Portugal's history. This is the same country that once built a global empire not by conquering giant continents, but by controlling key ports, sea routes, and strategic islands. 500 years ago, Portuguese ships dominated global trade routes. Today, Portugal quietly holds some of the most important strategic positions in the Atlantic. Again, different technology, same strategy. And that's why the title of this video actually makes sense. Portugal shocked the world before, when its sailors mapped oceans and connected continents. In 2026, it's doing something surprisingly similar. A small country, a focused military, and a strategic position that makes the entire alliance stronger. Portugal didn't become powerful by being large. It became powerful by being exactly where NATO needs it most, which is why the next time someone says Portugal is just a small country on the edge of Europe, you might want to show them a map of the Atlantic, because in modern geopolitics, that edge of Europe might actually be the center of everything.